In today's equity index futures markets, let's all focus on this S&P 500 future, as we did see some selling pressure today. And an interesting day, really, when you look at the price action. Now, we did see the S&P futures lower overnight in the overnight session, then rallying and basically getting back to unchanged just before the open this morning. And then when we opened, we saw continued selling pressure, pushing the S&P futures back down to the low of the day, which was 27.11, but then rallying throughout the rest of the afternoon and settling out right around the 27.54 level, so well off the lows. And I think when you look at the drivers today, I think one of the factors pushing the S&P futures initially lower was the lack of reaction to the announcement coming out of OPEC Plus. We saw crude basically not doing much after that announcement. I think a disappointment in the actual amount that's coming off. Even though it's a record amount, it's still less than what the market perceives as being enough of a supply disruption to possibly support the current price structure within the crude space. And I think that was part of the reason why we saw some selling pressure in the S&P 500 futures today. Second of all, we had a holiday session today. Really, many of the other major equity markets were closed today. So again, I think you saw a thin market today, and algos were pushing the markets around today because of the fact that we did see some thinner markets because of the holiday schedule. And the third thing I think is when you look at the announcements coming out this week, earnings are going to kick off here in a couple of days. And I think that's another factor that the market's kind of waiting for. But ultimately, when you look at the trends today, I think it did settle on a positive note, even though down on the day. That was the high end of the range for the afternoon, and it did have some upward momentum as we finished out today. So I think even though we gave up a little ground today, you're still seeing a nice uptrend in the S&P 500 futures. And let's finish on the fact that we did see the NASDAQ futures actually higher on the day, maintaining that upward trend and pushing up to 2.5-week highs, as we saw the NASDAQ futures responding very positively. Some of the names within the NASDAQ were very strong today, and I think, again, that was certainly helping the NASDAQ futures find a bid. But counteracting some of the weakness we saw in the S&P and the Dow, the NASDAQ futures actually finishing positive on the day.